everyone. Welcome back. It's Steph and Rach here. We are, of course, the creators of Wealth, Wisdom, and Wellbeing podcast. We're so pumped that you're with us today. And we are here, Rach, for episode 3. Yeah. So today we're diving in. We're pulling back the curtain on all things financial verbiage, the lingo mumbo jumbo, all that confusion. We are starting to shed some light on that and simplify. So basically, starting fresh, making it simple, simplify. So today, we're going to just jump into improving our financial literacy. That is something we're excited to chat with you about. So we're going to start out our self-education right here, right now. So let's jump in, Rach.
Let's do it. So, Steph, in recent years, we've been having a lot of discussions regarding markets, investment tools, and products. But it wasn't always like this. Before we embarked on our own journeys of financial literacy, we didn't have much knowledge to discuss much of anything. I think what we knew at the time is that we didn't know a lot.
Nothing.
We knew nothing. And that's okay. You have to start from somewhere. But how would you say, Steph, that you started getting into this space of increasing your own financial literacy?
Yeah, when I think back, we were kind of chatting a little bit about this earlier, and it started back when I was in my union job, and we had an allocated amount of money to either put towards, the house spending account or the tax-free savings account. And at this point, I'd actually realized, tax-free savings account, you invest that money. It's not just a savings account. So that was the first kind of intro to be like, wow, okay. And there was a few girls I worked with in the union, and you could tell they had an upper hand in a sense with this stuff. Like, they really understood the concepts. So I asked a lot of questions, and then I went in and did a risk calculator. So I started there, figured out where to allocate some of that money. And it was, oh, bless you. It wasn't until I left the union though, that I had this lira that they're like, okay, we're putting your money into lira. I'm like, oh, what? And so if anyone doesn't know what that is, because I didn't, it's basically a retirement account for your union money that you would put into your pension. So if you leave the union early, it goes into this account and you can't touch it until a certain age. So I believe it's 55. But anyways, so within this account though, when I Googled it, I realized you could do some investments in it. I was like, how can I get my money working for me? Anyways, my partner, my husband, he said, I've been reading this book. So it just kind of aligned. I don't know. The universe was thinking we needed some financial literacy. And he was reading Tony Robbins' Master the Game. And I remember he was also starting his Wealthsimple account, kind of like that self-directed account at that time. And yeah, from there, that's where I just started to read one book. And then it turned into 5 and then 6 and then listening to podcasts and then spiral the snowball effect, right? And that the Instagram accounts, and that's where it started for me. How about you, Rach?
Similar, I suppose, in the way that it was through my employer. So typical of oil and gas companies is they offer some type of retirement savings incentive. So for the company I was working for at the time, it was RSP matching. But at that time, they didn't just say, okay, here's whatever it is, $100 a month, it's going to go in this RSP account. You would do a survey similar to what you said. It was a risk assessment, your own risk review, your own risk appetite. You'd go through this survey, and then in the end, the platform that you were working on would say, we suggest you invest in this fund. So in order for me to select a fund, I had to learn which fund, what was behind it, what were the investments behind the fund, and then start educating myself on what that actually meant. So it really started with that, is I had this slew of options, and I had no idea why one option was different from the other until I started investigating and learning more about it. So that's how I started on my financial literacy journey.
Rach, I'm impressed that you went. Like, this is so you too, because you're such a researcher as well at heart, like always have been. But I love that you went in and you like started looking at, okay, this is this type of investment. I'm going to Google and whatever, do your research, right? I didn't. I was like, okay, I want, I think I said medium risk at the time or something. And it was like this pie chart I just remembered. It's like percentage this with all these little letters. And I was like, cool, sounds good. And just left it, right? And it wasn't until, because that was all actively managed, but it wasn't until I went into the self-directed that I was like, right, I got to look up, oh, these are tickers. These are how you find, you know, these certain investment anyways. So
it's still a great place to start though, as far as picking what one of the options, or at least you picked something, right? And then give yourself some grace in that you went through that exercise. And then when the quote you used in a previous episode, when you know better, you do better. And
so
you did.
True. And I did. And here we are. No, it's awesome. Well, and we have to say, guys, it is, so this at the time of airing is probably no longer applicable. But did you know nationally, in Canada and the US, there's actually months that are dedicated to financial literacy and the improvement of financial literacy. So in Canada, November is our month for financial literacy. And in the United States, it's April. What an awful time during taxes. But I guess finances, they're at your forefront. But this is awesome because these initiatives are empowering people, even if it is just for 1 month out of a year, to kickstart them to go and revisit their finances, to learn something new, and to improve their literacy around this topic.
I think to one thing though, discussion too, right, Steph? Just even bringing up, huge. I had no idea. I can bring up with my friends now, hey, it's financial literacy month. And then it hopefully opens a small door to, let's talk about that. What does that mean to you? How do you feel about your own financial literacy? So it's a great icebreaker, if you will.
Absolutely. Well, even since we started doing this podcast, you know, and I just let little snidbits out to my mom, just kind of drop things here and see what she, you know, what she responds with. But she's sharing a few things. She's changing a few things up in her like policies at her work, and she's sharing with me about this. And I'm just, wow, like it's opened up some doors that we've never had conversations like this. Like 10 years ago, no way. Just, well, I didn't know to ask stuff like this, but she wasn't really sharing. So yeah, so powerful in the discussion piece.
I love that.
So Rach, when we're just looking at like one thing that stood out to me when I was looking at this month of financial literacy, and the stat, 33% of, this was for Americans, feel that they're financially literate. So that they have the knowledge, they have the financial skills to go out and do all the things associated with financial literacy.
Feels low.
That's what I thought. It's like, that's not even half of the population. So, and I know there were some other stats too, right? Like from our survey that we sent out to our circle, there were some really interesting stats in there as well that I know we're going to get into. Yeah, but financial literacy is such an underrated skill. Like, it's just that knowledge is power. Mm-hmm. So what is financial literacy? We keep throwing around this term. Okay, let's get to it. What is it? So here's a definition for you. Financial literacy is the ability to understand and make use of a variety of financial skills, including personal financial management, budgeting, and investing. So when we have financial literacy, the research is really clear. We are more likely to have more of our income kept in our bank, so spending less, have an emergency fund anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and have retirement accounts or other investment vehicles that are being used than those with lower financial literacy.
Pretty
It's pretty
incredible.
awesome.
It seems like it's something that is easily attainable, especially now with the internet. That you can learn anything you want to learn. So financial literacy is as important as ever these days. Common between Canada and the US is the importance of people funding their retirement savings outside of pensions. I'm not sure, Steph, if your parents had mentioned their pensions. My mom had a pension with a company that she worked for here for almost 20 years. I should say she still has the pension. And I believe it's quite robust, but that doesn't happen anymore. So now it's more common for individuals to really have to actively plan for their own retirement, manage their own retirement, and not rely on the companies that they work for to have these funds available to them. So financial literacy plays a very important part in this, because if it's you or I needing to come up with our own retirement plan, I need to know what I'm doing or have an idea of how to get to what my goal is. And that starts with this financial literacy.
Yeah, because like even to know what questions to ask, like you're not being guided through it. So exactly, like you don't have that blueprint necessarily anymore. So you gotta kind of know even just the questions to start asking. You don't even have to know the plan, of course, but just that first step in asking questions and being open to asking questions, I think, is key in our day and age.
And I agree, and it's difficult now as well with there's a positive side with having so many tools available, right? We mentioned the internet before. You can go and search anything. You can use any banking tool, either a traditional bank. There's the Quest Wealth, the Tangerines, banks that weren't around when I started banking. And it can be
You don't even
really,
need to go to a physical bank anymore. You can
right.
bank online. Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
just so many options. So it can be really overwhelming if you don't have some basis or basic understanding of finance. So this is really the foundation for everything going forward when it comes to planning your budget, your retirement, even related to insurance. All of that comes down to a basic understanding, this financial literacy. So I love that we're on episode 3 talking about this, because it will really provide the framework for everything we discuss in the future.
Yeah, it will. Absolutely. And I think it is overwhelming, even this intro. Like, you're like, okay, like if you're feeling like, holy man, this is over my head, like, let's just all take a really deep breath and let it out. Like, it's okay. This is the first step. And drop any questions that come up. Start writing them down, little notes in your phone or whatever, and drop them in the comments for us.
Mm-hmm. So, Steph, why, in your opinion, why don't you think financial literacy is something that's more organically obtained, especially for women? And I say organically obtained because it's not something that I just had kind of a background buzz of understanding going into my adult life. It was a real deliberate decision to pursue this knowledge. So in your opinion, why do you think that's been the case for women especially?
I think it's a really good question and really important question to ask, Rach. And I'm not sure that there's a super clear-cut answer, but a few things that come to mind. I just feel like there's so many different factors. Like with our generation and growing up and the generations before us, those traditional gender roles were still pretty prominent, especially even in our generations in the household. and especially in our parents' generation. And then just depending on like what kind of family you grew up in, what were those beliefs around money, your core values, what was the base knowledge your family had, like as an individual, that's really going to influence your involvement, your understanding, your exposure to these different concepts. So whatever was being taught and modeled to you in your childhood, I feel is crucial. Like that's, I think a big part of it for women, especially in those generations with the man kind of taking the lead, being the breadwinner, often driving a lot of that conversation. Oh, you don't need to worry about that. Like just that providing mentality. But there was a lot of the empowerment lost for women there, which is nice to see this change coming up now. Mm-hmm. And I think another big one is the school systems. Beyond some budgeting, I don't remember any conversations around investments, around retirement planning, nothing that would have stood out to me enough that I took something away from it. So I feel like that's a really important place that could be, enhanced for women especially, but for everyone.
I wonder if that will change now because I think about what I was doing in comms class, career and life management. I think that's what it stood for. And it was a lot of increasing your typing speed and writing resumes. But now with chat bots, chat GPT or whatever it is called, you can just put in, write a resume for me for X job, right? But I don't know, and maybe you can. Maybe I'm old and don't know about this yet. But can you put in there, what should I invest in? I have $30,000 of liquid cash. What do I do? I'm not sure a real helpful answer will show up. So I wonder now as schools, because you can find resumes on the internet, you can have a bot write it for you. Maybe they'll pivot, and maybe they have, but for sure, I think with some of the listeners that we're trying to target, with our own friends, our own circles, our own experiences, it absolutely was not something that was discussed in school.
Yes, exactly. We're just speaking from our experience. However, it would be good to know. Yeah, let us know. What are your kids learning about in school? Is this something that is more at the forefront, or that you're having conversations about because it's being brought up in school? That'd actually be really, really interesting to know more about.
To know. And also with this financial literacy that we're building, if those discussions are happening at school, is it similar? Are they more advanced? Are we behind? I would love to know.
We're right on time, Rach. Yes. Yeah. No, and I think too, just what is one of the things that we always say? The best time to start investing was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. Mm-hmm. So that empowerment, the shame, the embarrassment, anything that's coming out of this, coming up for you, honor that, and then let's move forward and just, take our next step. So Rach, when we're looking at women, just like some of those stats we had in our questionnaire, we did target just to females. Mm-hmm. Do you want to just go over, can we just chat about those a little bit? Because I thought that was super interesting. Just, we know these women personally, and just to hear where they were at.
Yes, I'd love to. So from the pool of women that we surveyed, again, these are friends of friends, family members that are in our lives. 92% said that they would like more information on investing.
Yeah!
Enter the clap sound effect.
I was just thinking about it, right?
That's so fantastic. That's a great stat. I love it. And I hope this is helpful with that. 33% said they would like more information on savings, and 25% said more on budgeting. Then 57% of our surveyed bunch wished they had knowledge between the ages of 20 and 25. So they wish that they knew more about finances, investing years ago. And 57
Share this podcast.
Yes, that's the podcast.
With your younger generations, yeah.
57% said that they were involved in their own planning for retirement. This is a stat that I'm surprised by. I thought that statistic would have been higher, because that tells us that 43% are not involved in their own retirement. Mm-hmm. And of course, there was no box on this survey for comments. So I don't know if that means that they are planning, but they're just not in the driver's seat. I don't know if that means that maybe it's through work, but what it does tell me is, to me, involvement is not, that should be active participation. So if they're, I messed up the stat, they are involved. Sorry, Steph, let me start that again. 57% of our surveyed bunch said that they were involved in their own planning for retirement. We would love to see this statistic higher. I'm hoping this podcast and our discussions helps to increase that number. My hope would be for the women in my life to have an active role in planning for their retirement. You just don't know what the future holds. And I just want everyone to be prepared. I just want everyone to know what's in store for them when it comes to planning.
Yeah.
What I do like, though, is 78% said that they would know what to do with their retirement plan if their spouse disappeared, which does tell me that maybe 57% are involved, which means 43% are not. But of that 43%, some of them would know what to do if their spouse disappeared. So it's a fine number. I'm okay with that one. But it was very interesting to see these results, and it definitely helped us to shape what we wanted to discuss in our own podcast. So it was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, exactly. Because at the end of the day, we are just wanting everyone to be empowered by the knowledge and to know the numbers and their unique situation. What are your needs? What are your wants? Like, we're empowering to live the best life you can. So without that information, it's more likely we're going to make poorer financial decisions. You know, this is really about helping you become more self-sufficient and achieving that financial stability. And yeah, so that knowledge is so key. But I was happy to see that 78% felt confident they'd know what to do. That tells me that the conversations between partners is happening. And yeah. So I guess one step in financial literacy and building your financial skills is obtaining knowledge. So through a podcast like this, what are some steps, though, some really practical steps, Rach, that people can take, our listeners can take for financial literacy improvement?
So our first step is to evaluate your money mindset. So if you tuned into our previous episodes, you know that we talk about really reviewing or considering how you view money and how that relationship with money has been shaped by your upbringing, through your relationships, and just being aware of those beliefs around money, because they will influence or dictate the actions you take, the decisions you make. So having that awareness will be helpful for the following steps. So it's evaluating your money mindset. Then step 2 is developing awareness around your income and expenses. And this would be for preparation of developing a budget. So you need to have an idea, and this piece is really that is just that awareness. It's having an idea of what income you're bringing in, so what your wage or salary, however it is that you make money, what those numbers look like, and then understanding what you're spending your money on, your needs and your wants.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that awareness, we can actually put it down either into some banking tool, some platform. If you want to see the numbers on a piece of paper, you could do the old budget on, spreadsheet, whatever works for you.
Oh,
but it's
that's what we do.
There you go. And some people prefer it. But then it's really developing that budget and seeing real numbers of your income and your expenses, then what's left over, or alternatively, what your overages are. So what your debt is looking like. And then with those 3 steps, we can then start looking at the tools that will help us for investing. But we can't get to that point until we figure out what we're actually working with.
Yeah. So 1, evaluate your money mindset. What are your beliefs? 2, develop the awareness. What is your overall income versus expenses? 3,
details.
There's the other finger. Get the details. The details are so important. And then 4, well, that's going to be learning more about tools in the next episode. But Rach, like with budgeting, let's dive into that and let's just chat a little bit. I know I said like we use a spreadsheet, something classic, super old school. There's so many different apps. There's all these different things. But can you just tell us a little bit more like what is a budget for the listeners, just so they have this baseline?
A budget is your best friend. So to begin improving your financial health, you need to know how much money you make and then what you're spending it on. So a budget will identify what your income is, what your expenses are, and then the details will help you to see what you're allocating your income on. So an individual can... So a simple budget template will typically tell you spend 50% of your income on your needs, 20% on savings, and 30% on wants. So when we actually put our income and expenses down, again, whether it's a banking tool, whether it's a pen and paper spreadsheet, that's when we'll be able to see where we fall within these percentages. And this isn't a hard and fast rule. Like 50% on needs isn't going to work for everybody, but it's just a bit of a, I don't even want to say a target. It's just something that has been often used, but it doesn't mean...
Yeah, like a guideline.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be for you. And it can vary too, depending on your stage of life. As a student, that 50% on needs would have been a gross underestimate. So it really does depend on just your life stage and what's happening. So when we talk about income is all the money that you are receiving, whether it's from work, gifts, maybe you're receiving alimony, a settlement, maybe you have a lucrative hobby. Whatever money is coming into your account, into your hands, that is your income. Expenses, on the other hand, are things that you spend your money on. Typically, we separate these into 2 categories. One meaning fixed, does not change, and the other is discretionary. Fixed are expenses, like I said, that don't change. They have very little variability. This will often be your rent or your mortgage. So your rent typically, I don't know anyone who has a rent that one month it's $200, the next month it's $500. Your rent should stay fairly static, or your mortgage should stay fairly static for an extended period of time, maybe 1, 2, 3 years.
The food we had under discretionary, but I'll tell you, with all these different taxes that we're getting and the things that are happening on goods, that one can be variable.
Yes, absolutely. I would agree with that. Other examples of fixed expenses, maybe it's insurance. You typically know what you're going to be spending in the year on insurance, whether it's car insurance, home insurance, life insurance, health insurance, loan payments. If you're signed into a loan, that tends to be over a specific amount of time. Maybe it's a car loan, maybe you have 5 years to pay. You know what you'll be paying monthly. So these are essential to living your life. These tend to be the fixed expenses. The discretionary expenses are expenses that you can live without. So that might include shopping, travel, restaurants, going to the movies, Netflix accounts, whatever it might be that you don't need to survive. So these are your two buckets of expenses. Savings is the money that you can save after you've paid for your fixed or your essential expenses. So how you allocate the savings will be largely determined by how quickly you need access to this money. So we will talk more in depth about this later. Some savings might be longer term, some savings might be shorter term. Shorter term savings tend to be the savings that allow you to access your money maybe when you need to. It becomes more liquid. It's just there when you need it.
Yeah, and I think like with this one too, with the savings, this is usually for people money that you're going to need in the next couple of years, 1 to 3 years or so, even up to 5, right? Mm-hmm. So it just depends if you've got some bigger purchases you're thinking about, if you're saving for a house or like a family trip or something like that. That is something that you're going to want to consider shorter term, and that'd be your savings. Whereas investing, which we're going to talk about in future episodes, that's money that you're not going to need for the next 5 years minimum.
That's a great summary, Steph. So now that we know these categories, income, expenses, savings, then we can start tracking to complete the budget. A good timeline to really get a very clear picture of your expenses versus income would be to track these buckets over 3 to 6 months. With a longer timeline, it helps to consider expenses that may come up that wouldn't regularly come up. So I, in the last 3 months, have had to fix 2 windows that my 7-year-old broke. So those are expenses that if I were tracking 6 months ago, they wouldn't have appeared. But with a longer tracking duration, they did come up. So not that they're going to come up every year, maybe not even every 5 years, but it's these incidentals that help establish the one-offs. Maybe if I'm tracking this and I include these window expenses, it gives me an idea of a rainy day fund, right? Which you might need if things come up. So it's good to have a plan to track to track these buckets over a period of about 3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. Then once we have that budget picture, the story will be, this is your income, these are your expenses, this is the money you have left over, and then we can start considering, okay, what do we do with these funds that are left over? What makes sense for you in your future planning of where you want to start putting this money? And then we'll start talking about what your options are.
So yeah, and what happens though, Rach, is we do this budget, we've got this awareness of where we're spending our money, what our fixed versus discretionary expenses are, and then we are in the negative.
what does
We don't
happen,
have any leftover.
one amazing thing is good for you for finding out that you're in the negative. This is not something that you want to bury your head in the sand over and continue on being in the negative. The lovely part about having this budget, even if it identifies you're spending more than you're bringing in, is you'll be able to see exactly what you're spending on. So it should be very simple decisions, quick decisions to say, maybe I don't need this expense that I seem to be doing every month and doesn't bring me joy and doesn't kind of help me get to the goal that I want to get to. So that's okay. If you're in the red, which typically means you're going into debt, fantastic. You've identified it. Now let's rectify it. Let's figure out what we can do to get you back in the black.
Yeah, and that plan, because that's what we need is a plan. And yeah, I think what you just said there about reviewing the categories and seeing, because you'll be clearly, like if you're looking at an Excel spreadsheet, you're using a template, usually they have a certain number of categories on there. You can add in and customize based on your lifestyle and the categories that come up for you when you're going through your statements on your Visa, your MasterCard, whatever credit cards you have, and then your accounts that you're withdrawing from. So your debit accounts to pay bills and such. When you see, so for example, for us, just this last week, we just did March's budget here. Food was astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
Gas, always, like food and gas always seem to be really high ones. And then shopping. And this one is a work in progress over here. Made fantastic improvements the last 4 months, but those are the ones. So the food we're looking at, okay, like how can we even bring this down a little bit more? Let's try a meal plan this month.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at getting really specific about what we're going to be eating, and so that we're very specific about what we're going to be buying.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll let you know how that goes, but that's one area
to hear. That's also something we're struggling with in our household. Like you mentioned earlier, the price of food has increased substantially, or I should say significantly. And it seems like your basic goods are just so much more expensive. So I would
$16
for what?
For green grapes.
Oh, it's insane.
$16 for like a pack of green. I was like, I got to the checkout. I was like, nope, we're not taking these today. We'll wait till there's a sale or like a price that, and that was on sale, the lady said. I was like, well, that's not on sale enough. So I got her to take it off.
And that's okay, like right? Like those are decisions that you're not the only one who's making them. And it's just good to be aware. It's really awareness, and then just understanding what is in your control to change. I think that's great. I'm really interested to see how your meal planning goes, Steph, and if you find it does make a significant impact on your cost of food for the following month. Please keep us posted.
Yeah.
And for whoever's listening,
sure.
I'd also be interested to hear what you're doing to I guess control your variable expenses.
Mm-hmm.
But Steph,
and a lot of people, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, sure. With the banks though, often you can easily track inside their apps now where your money is going throughout the month. So you can keep tabs on that pretty frequently when you're going in to look at your bank account. Really, really important, like when you're doing your budgeting, to review all of your bank account statements just to make sure there's no unexpected charges, duplicate charges, stuff like that does happen. So just a little quick tip there. However, with where I was like, oh, like for example, Mint. I did use it for a short time, but I had multiple bank accounts, so I found it a bit confusing to know how to join them all. But if you just have one bank account with the same branch or same company, it can be really helpful to use a third-party app such as Mint to track, and you can set the limits of the different categories too. So for especially like your discretionary items. So if you've got $500 for shopping, or you've got, whatever it is, right? You can set those all, and you're going to get notifications that will tell you, hey, you're coming close to this. And you can set how, like, the preferences for how frequently you want those notifications. Very useful tools, especially in the beginning when you're building this awareness, to keep you accountable. And two, if you did notice you were in the red, extremely helpful, because you're going to have less flexibility. So just something to consider looking into when you're thinking about how you'd like to do your budget.
Steph, you had an interesting take on this. What if you're in the red? If our listeners are in the red and they just think, I don't know who to pay first, debt wise. I see that I owe on my credit card. I see that I owe on this line of credit. What would you tell our listeners or our viewers?
So I got some great advice from a family member of mine. 10 years ago, I was in over $150,000 worth of debt. It's a pretty daunting number. The majority of that was student loans, or related to school from having to live off of a line of credit. So at that time, I'm like, okay, now getting into my career, I had 1 year grace period. Then I have to repay these student loans. What do I do? So I talked to this family member. I'd observed, I knew they'd be a good one. They had good financial literacy, I could tell. And I was like, what do I do? And so he was like, you need to pay yourself first, regardless of this debt. You pay yourself 10% of what you're making. Okay, so you put that away. So if you're making $1,000 a week, you're putting $100 away.
Away where?
Is it 100 or is it 10?
Away to spend stuff, or away
to save?
To save, okay.
So for you. So that's for investing in you, in your future. And he had said save because I wanted at that time, if I needed to access it, I could still, right? But really, your mindset you want to shift not. But the next big thing is, if you have a ton of debt and there's different sources, let's say you have credit card, line of credit, you have your mortgage, that's a debt as well. You want to look to see what the interest rates are on all those. So I would write down all the debt that you have, and then in the next column, write down the interest rate that you have to pay. You want to pay down the highest interest rate first. And you want to get rid of that. Typically, that's going to be your credit cards. Those are 20, 25%. Paying down that first.
That's great. That's very helpful to know. And it can be very daunting to see all of the red. But you can make a plan, like you've just said, and start to chip away at it. Step one, right?
Step one, exactly. And so with debt, we also want to remember, this kind of leads us in Rach to this conversation, that debt is what money we have borrowed. It's not money we've earned and we have that physically belongs to us. We're spending money that is not ours. And with that becomes we need to pay it back with money we've earned. So a few little tips here to ensure we're not racking up debt is really to make sure your income is greater than your expenses. So right now, if your income is less than what you're spending, it's a clear answer. You either have to be able to cut something from your budget, most likely discretionary things first, the things that aren't necessary, or you need to get another job, work more hours, figure out a way to increase your income. So if your expenses are more than your income, yeah, we know that's trouble. Like that's not going to in the long term be sustainable. And so when we borrow this money, we are paying this interest on it. So you're not only paying that principal, that initial amount, let's say it was $1,000, you're paying $1,000 plus 22%. What's 22% of $1,000? That's probably close to what, $250?
Yeah, 222.
1,000 times 22, $220. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll talk more about interest and how it can compound with time as well. But with the debt, there is also good debt. There is helpful debt. Debt is, we've been kind of conditioned to think debt is all bad. But the ultra wealthy, they own nothing. Everything is owned by banks. So there's strategy in using debt. And that is a whole nother topic and a whole nother ball game. But there will be some of you that are there, that can be using debt to your benefit. And we all can. And the first thing, though, is if you have consumer debt, paying that off, mm-hmm. especially at those high interest rates. So let's go back here. I'm just going to review my notes. Yeah. All right. So a good way to go back and track your spending is to look back at the last quarter. So the last 3 months. What did you spend? What does that look like? Then you want to look at your debt that you have, like we already talked about, and then starting with those high interest balances, and then look to see, starting there. Then once we have that all sorted out, we've paid down our debt, we're now going to be looking at what do we now have going into the savings, because you're paying yourself first. And then what can you start investing that you don't need that immediate access to? And those are for your long-term lifestyle, your long-term goals.
And Steph, I love something that you said to me, I want to say about a year ago now. When we think about those long-term goals, really for me, it's retirement. I don't really have a long-term goal at this point in my life where I say, I want to have enough to travel the world. I want enough to buy a boat. That's not who I am at this point. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm really thinking about when can I stop working? And I had been so hell-bent on freedom 60, freedom 55, whatever it might be, 65, thinking, I just have to work another 30 years, 20 years, and then I can retire. And you said to me, retirement is not an age, it's a number. And it's helped me to be less concerned, in a sense, about saving for retirement. I feel like there's less pressure. And it's less daunting to think, oh, shoot, I have another 30 years that I have to roll into this office and contribute. Whereas now it's that $ target where maybe we all luck out and our investments have an amazing 15 years in the markets. And I get to that number sooner than I turn 65. Well, I'm not going to keep rolling into the office. I'm going to say, peace out, bitches. I just hit my retirement number. So I just love that phrase. And I hope our listeners take that into consideration, that when you're thinking about your long-term goals, it doesn't have to be a set time. You can really plan that monetary target and think about ways to get there. I feel like it's less daunting. I know I said daunting before, but that's truly how I felt, that it was just less daunting to get to that goal, to fulfill that goal.
Exactly. And I'm looking up just because there's this movement called FIRE. And I think it's like freedom, independence, retirement. What is the meaning behind it? FIRE investment number. I didn't have this ready here. But yeah, so basically it's the financial independence retire early movement. So a lot of people are figuring out that number. What is it that I want per year to live off of? And not even just want and need, right? You need to consider both. I mean, for myself, I don't want to just be able to cover my basic needs. I want to be able to live a fulfilling life that involves travel and the things that bring me joy and that are important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Other people may be fine if they just covered their expenses and didn't have to work. So it's just a personal thing in that way. But you figure out your number.
Mm-hmm.
So 50,000 a year, it's 100,000 a year. So you have the number. Let's say it's 100,000 a year, okay, that you need. So what do? You times that by 25. So 25 years. So when you have that number, what is it? 100,000 a year.
I'm sorry. How much did I say a year? 50?
100,000.
Oh, 100?
Yeah, so it's 2.5 million. 100,000 a year to live. So it's 2.5 million you need invested in the market, assuming that, we're getting an average of 6 to 8%, hopefully higher, but I like to go more conservative with it, to live off of, right? And so what that's doing is it's giving you your inflation number too. So it corrects for that like 4% rule. We can break this down a little bit clearer too, but so basically it adjusts for inflation so that you can continue to pull from that amount and you're not going to run out of money. That's the concept around it.
And I don't want anyone to get scared away. That doesn't mean that you need to save $2.5 million because we'll be investing, but it's just the target, right? So I just want to make sure no one's like, now they've stopped listening to us. They're like, this will be impossible. No. You can get there.
And yes,
we can get there. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, and how are we going to get there, Rach? By not investing 2.5 million of our own dollars.
We let the market work for us.
Mm-hmm. And that's the power of
compound interest.
That's the power of compound interest. So the longer your time horizon, it's incredible to see if you're starting in your 20s, how little you need, that when you're 50, your money that let's say you did like $50,000, we'll do a compound interest calculator in maybe one of our other episodes, but you can pull it out and just kind of play around. It's incredible. Like that time horizon, it's everything. So it's great perspective to set up your kids as well. And for that generational wealth, right? So yes, retirement is not an age. It is a number. You do not have to work till 65. There are ways, especially if you are in your like 20s to like 40s, you have the benefit of time on your side. Mm-hmm. If you're over 40, not all is lost. I mean, we're creeping up to 40 here too, but not all is lost. You just have to have a little bit more being invested. And so, yeah.
Steph,
I think this brings us to...
Sorry, we can edit this piece out.
No.
I was trying to get quickly a calculator up, which is why I've gone.
Yeah, we can throw it in.
But I feel like it'd be interesting to say how much you actually need to retire with 2.5. But it's hard because all of the things ask for age. They don't base it on
time horizon.
Yeah, like it's all like,
okay, I'll pull up the one I usually use.
And what's your retirement age? Like that's what they keep asking.
Yeah.
Which is
so let's just say someone invests 50,000, and then we'll just assume a 7% return, and then how many years? We'll say 30 years. So let's say they did it at 20. Okay. So for example, if we want to get to that 2.5 million, we'd have to adjust. But so let's say we're in our 20s and we've got $60,000 initially invested. We're contributing 500 per month over 30 years. That 60,000 initial investment with our contribution would be $1,023,500. If we didn't contribute anything monthly, we just had 60,000. Let's say we had an inheritance, or hopefully not at that age, but or like some kind of, we had a winning of some sort and we chose to invest it. So if we invested $60,000 at the age of 20, if we just let it sit there in the market in an index fund, 30 years, so you're going to be 50, you'd have $500,000.
And that's without
From 60,000.
continuously contributing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the power of compound interest. It's crazy.
The power of compound interest, yeah.
So it doesn't have
and
to
with
be
debt,
too scary, hey?
No, it doesn't. And exactly. And everyone's is going to be different with what they're wanting and needing for their lifestyle, but I think this just like leads really well into that, the wealth versus rich. You want to just touch on that, Rach?
Sure. So there's been some discussion I've seen lately on rich versus wealth, or wealth versus rich. And I think this is well highlighted. Let me rephrase. Should I relate it to the budget? What do you think?
Like where you're putting your money?
Yeah.
I think even just, yeah, you could, and just like relate it to even like lifestyle.
Okay. So after review of your budget, you'll be able to see, again, very clear picture of where you're allocating your money, and again, what you have to invest. And what I like about this is it ties well into this concept of wealth versus rich. So, and again, in the spirit of our own podcast, it is wealth, wisdom, and well-being. We are in pursuit of wealth. Steph and I, are not in pursuit of rich. So what's the difference? Wealth is the accumulation of assets. It is not money spent on material things. So a really quick way to think about this is wealth is what you are not spending. So wealth is money you don't spend. So if you are rich, you likely have a relatively high current income, but being wealthy it may not be visible. So it's money that you haven't spent. So it's not potentially you in a Porsche. It might not be you with, who knows, whatever it is, whatever your vice is, big diamonds, whatever it might be. It's money really that's working for you. It's money in the bank. It's money in investments. Rich is lovely. It offers you opportunities in the short term, but wealth provides you the flexibility of having more time, more freedom in your future. It's choice. It's flexibility. It's not really possessions. So I love this rich versus wealth. And the other side of this is when you have that money mindset, when you've thought about that, think about how you view wealth versus rich and see how your money mindset relates to that concept. I'd be very interested to hear any of your comments. Please feel free to send them to us on what this means to you. What's it mean to you, Steph?
This was Oh my gosh, this, like, I can't even wait for your question because I'm just like, this was such a shift for myself. We talked about shopping earlier, and how I'm still reevaluating that consumerism. But here's the thing that just, it made so much sense to me. When you look at the majority of people who are going and driving cars, and they're really like high-end luxury vehicles, Range Rovers, Mercedes, Lexus, Ferraris, whatever. When you've got these cars, the majority of people that are driving them are rich. They are not wealthy. So what that means is they have a very high income job, but they have a lot of debt. And if they were to lose that job, they would not be able to pay for that car. So you've got someone who has like a Toyota paid off, okay? And then you've got someone who has a Range Rover. And when you look at them both, they might have, like, you might think one is richer than the other. But the person driving the Toyota that's paid off is actually wealthy because they have that no commitment to that. If they lose their job, they don't have a payment. Mm-hmm. They're not tied to that. They're not at risk at losing their vehicle. They're just like, I was just like, oh, wow. But I always assumed people who had these luxury items were really rich or like really like well off. Mm-hmm. But most of them have really high debt. And they also could have a really high income. But if that income was gone, no more time, freedom, and they have to work all the time
to pay for their things.
So they're not able to pay for the things. Yeah, they're not able to take a Monday off to go hang out with their kids. They're working to pay for their lifestyle.
For sure. I think where I would like to be in my fantasy that lives in my head is I would like both, right? I'd like to drive the Range Rover and also have the wealth. Realistically, unless I'm winning a lottery sometime in the next couple of years, that's just not my situation at the moment. And it might not be, and that's okay. What I liked about the Money Matters book, was it called Money Matters stuff?
Oh, the Morgan Housel one? Yeah, Psychology of Money.
Okay, I'm going to start that again.
Yeah.
What I liked about Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money is he briefly discusses in there he had an example about the fancy cars. And he said, when you see someone driving a car that you like, that is considered fancy, right? You listed a bunch of makes. Let's say it's one of those. Do you ever remember the person? Do you ever take a really good look at who's driving the car? Or are you looking at that car and you're already in your head about, oh, I would want that car, right? You think about yourself in that car. So this resonated with me. It's funny that we both had like vehicle examples resonate with us because I don't feel like we're typically vehicle people. But that one resonated with me because I thought, yeah, I'm not ever looking at that person. I couldn't remember a face of someone driving a fancy car, but I always picture myself in that car. So then when I think about what I think I will gain from purchasing a vehicle like that, it's not actually what I want. It's I want people to notice me, but they're not noticing me. They're noticing the car. So even that doesn't have the result that I'm hoping for in spending that type of money. That was an important mind shift for me. And it's actually what led me to sell my car. Maybe now we're at 2 months ago. I downsized into a beater. Oh. Did I tell you this?
No way.
Yeah. So we sold our vehicle. I bought an older vehicle, a 2009, and I invested the difference. So I invested, the difference in what I sold the car for and what I purchased this old car for. I'd like to thank Morgan Housel.
That's a beautiful example. And you know what that speaks to, Rach, is like, not only are you sitting here doing this podcast, how you're doing the work for yourself and your family. That's a really big decision.
It was.
And it's especially like as a society, when we're so focused on how people perceive us, we know that people are aware of like nice things. And when you downsize to something, people might think,
they're in
oh,
trouble.
She's struggling. Uh-huh.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting you say that, because the thought did cross my mind. But at the end of the day, and I don't feel like this every day. Like, don't get me wrong, Steph, listeners. It's sometimes I do care about what people think, and I try not to, but it happens, right?
We're human.
But at the end of the day, I'm like, if you do think things are poorly for me financially, I will accept your frozen lasagna. That is okay. Let's talk about it, right? Or let's not talk about it, and you can think what you want, and I'll let my extra cash have the compound interest work its magic. But
yeah, and when they're still focused on being retired at 65, and you now know that retirement is a number, and you know what? You've calculated your number, and you knew that downsizing, investing the difference is getting you closer to that number and that freedom, that time. Wow.
All to say too,
yeah, and I think
that this is a journey. Steph and I talk about this.
Journey.
I feel like what we say are the things we feel we should be doing. I don't feel like I do them all the time. But when I do them, I will absolutely share it with everybody. And I hope that our listeners share those kind of moments with us as well, because it's hard. It's hard to keep... It's hard to stay practical. I don't know. I find it difficult.
It is difficult, and we can get carried away with different things, and we can get off course, but the key is course correcting. And just like with, again, back to the awareness piece, when you have that awareness, you can course correct easier and quicker, and the hiccups will become less of a... It'll be more, they're always going to be there, but there's going to be a less of a big drop. I think too, phase of life is really key here. So we both, Rach, have really young kids. And for myself, it is more important to me to be spending time with our daughter than it is to be accumulating wealth in this current time. My presence right now, and this has been a big shift in the past 2 years, but my presence with her is more important than in building my investments right now. So what does that mean? That means that instead of taking on more work or producing more and creating more products for people, I am investing my energy into being present and cutting maybe down in other areas currently so that we can spend the time on a Monday afternoon going to the park, the three of us as a family. So as she gets older, that's likely going to shift. And when she doesn't want to hang out with me as much anymore, So that time piece is more important than the finances.
But Steph, I think it's important to note, though, you haven't stopped paying yourself, and you haven't likely stopped investing. It might just not be at the magnitude that you were doing 2 years ago. Yeah. So it's not a complete
and
it's a shift.
No. And that's a good point. No, the habit is still there, because really this is what we do, is we're creating habits for ourselves with having those direct withdrawals. And yes, you adjust the amount. Just like if you start with, $25 a month to do an investment, and then you get a pay raise, or you've paid off debt and you now have a greater amount available to you, then you adjust as you go. It doesn't always mean you have the same number. And I just wanted to normalize that, because I think it comes back to like where your current values are, where you currently are at in your situation. So that, yeah, I think that's just really important.
Absolutely.
And there was one thing, just other thing that you said, Rach, that you said something around, in my fantasy life, I would be doing all of this, meaning investments and creating wealth for my future and investing in my future. And I'd be driving that Range Rover, right?
Yeah.
And I think the key is you can have both.
Yeah.
Just because if that is important to you, the difference between a rich and a wealthy person is the rich person is going to buy it before they have the actual finances for it. So they're going to put it into debt. And I'm not saying that a wealthy person wouldn't use debt. However, what I'm saying is the wealthy person, they have enough invested that they're paying for that car with the interest they're making on their investments. Mm-hmm. So for me, until I have the interest that I'm getting paid to purchase something, I'm not buying it, because in my mind, that's not affording it. Mm-hmm. But you can have both. It just is the timeline and horizon. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I 100% agree. It's really, what is the right timing? And when we talk money, that's right. I love that you bring up interest, because that is time. So I think that's great. And I like that. I want to use that for my superfluous spending. If I can do it with interest, why not? It's funny though, because I think about that, but at the same time, you get into that habit. You mentioned habits. We're building positive habits around money, about building wealth. I think it's going to be hard to take that interest and put it into something that's a commodity, or like a consumer good, I should say, because you're building these habits. You know what you're losing, not reinvesting that interest. So it's a great mm-hmm. habit. It's probably going to be a difficult one to break,
and I think that's hilarious in a sense too, because what that highlights is with time, and as you start to put value on the things in your life, I think it speaks to your beliefs, and what your beliefs and your values will change. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, you may have used to want this 3,000 square foot house and the Range Rover and all these things. But then as you realize the power in investing, and also as you age and realize the beautiful joy out of simplicity and experiences and freedom and time, mm-hmm. those wants likely are going to shift. And I think I'd actually feel so freaking awesome driving like this like mediocre vehicle, and just everyone thinking, oh, she must be struggling. I actually kind of love that. I don't know why, but I think it's just like this like satisfaction of just me knowing, and it's like, no, I'm good.
I think that also speaks to your confidence in yourself though, which is fantastic. And I hope our listeners build to that, or are already there, because I don't even want to say what you have. It's not even that. It's not knowing what you have, but you know your journey, and it's almost like you know how far along you are on it, and that's pretty powerful. I think that's great. I also like looking like the underdog. Please underestimate me, because I would love to surprise you, right? Like, it's just kind of nice.
100%. Mm-hmm. And then you see the pictures of like, oh, you're in Hawaii this month, you're in Italy this month, you're on 6 trips a year with your family, 2 weeks at a time. You've just only worked 8 months out of the year. Yeah. That's wealth to me. That stuff lights me up.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I think I love this raw, real conversation, Rach. Like this really fueled me. I know like that. I just know our conversations for the listeners of having these terminology and all of that is so important. But I think there's just a lot of learning that comes out of storytelling
Mm-hmm.
and those real experiences. So one thing before we're wrapping up here, I just would love to touch on the budgeting again.
So, Steph, I have a budget that I'd say I manage, and my partner is just consulted, which is exactly how
You're the driver of it.
yeah.
Roles are totally reversed. We've got a female led. Yeah.
Which
love it.
It's fine with him, and it works for me. So for my budget, the tool that I use is through my bank. So through my banking portal, I can see they bucket the things for me. So they'll show income, they'll have expenses, and then they break down the expenses as food, education, vehicle. I guess they put it under transport. So I like the way my bank does it. I'm sure there's comparable tools, probably better tools, but this one works for me. So when it comes to a budget, I have my income line. So my income is just from my job. I don't have a separate source of income. That might not be the same. I know it's not the same for everyone. Income for others might be that job, their wage, their salary. It might be a hobby that brings in money. Maybe you're selling baked goods as a side business. Maybe you're tutoring. That would also bring in money, which means income. It might be
maybe you have real estate and you have rental properties that are bringing you in, consistent income. That's also income as well.
Absolutely. It might be gifts. You might have alimony. It might be a settlement from something that occurred. So all of this is income. It's money that's coming into your pocket, into your bank. Then I also have, like I mentioned, expenses. So in my app, my typical expenses, and I think typical for most, there's food, there's my mortgage, it could be your rent. You might have a car payment. I have insurance. There's tutoring for my son. So these are anything where you have money leaving your pocket, leaving your bank, that is considered an expense. For most, you'll have your fixed expenses. So for me, it's my mortgage. I know what that's going to be every month. It doesn't change. It's going to be pretty static for a number of years. That's also the same for my insurance. Could be the same for someone who has a car payment. Then my variable expenses are those that I'd say are discretionary. So I don't need them to live. I don't need to get my nails done, my hair highlighted. There's travel, going out for dinner. My boys love Little Caesars pizza. That every week is in my budget. Is it a need? My 7-year-old would argue yes. But it's not. It's discretionary, right? So that's my budget. So I have my income, I have my expenses. I also have savings. So the difference between my income and expenses is extra cash. And that I allocate to a savings account, so a rainy day fund. My 7-year-old recently broke 2 of our windows. So out of that savings rainy day fund that I've been building, I've paid for the windows. So that was considered an expense. But as I was building my savings, that would have just been money allocated to savings. And then I also have a portion.
And do you have a number?
Pardon me?
Sorry, Rach, just to jump in there for your savings. Do you guys also have, for your savings, is that the 3 to 6 month type one?
Yes.
Like the 3 to 6 month. And so that's what you guys are working on building right now.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And then do you have a number that once you get to there that you're going to stop contributing?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks for clarifying, because I just wanted to, just curious on that one.
No, those are great questions, because Steph, and I'm certain you know this. So for us, it's a 6-month fund. So once I reach that 6 month, I don't want to continue putting money into it, because that money really isn't working for me. My interest rate on my savings account is not fantastic. Whereas if I've reached that amount,
what is your savings account interest rate?
So right now it's 5.25%, which isn't bad, but I got it on a promotion. So through one of the banks, they had the deposit now and you'll receive 5.25% on all new deposits. So I was like, perfect. So I moved all my savings there so I could maximize the interest rate. But at some point, I don't want to put money there anymore, and I want to put it back. I want to put it into investing because I'll get a better rate. So
exactly.
So we do keep our 6-month rainy day fund, just that, at about 6 months worth of expenses. And then the rainy day fund is there to use. So when I pulled from it to use to pay for the windows, then I just build it back up to where it was, and then I can allocate my money elsewhere. But that rainy day fund is just that, for rainy day things. It's not because I want those pants from Everlane that I've been eyeing and have had in my shopping cart for 3 months. I will not use my rainy day fund for that, but I use it for the bigger things. If your furnace goes, that's a huge expense. I'd probably pull from the rainy day fund. So that's how.
So where do you buy those Everlane pants out of?
The Everlane pants? I'm going to ask for them for Mother's Day, I think. That's what I'm going to do.
So, okay, so it's going to be like a part of like your budget with your gift fund or something. Or, and as a part of your line of the budget, to you and your, like, do you and Aaron get like amount
like slush fund
each month to spend? Yeah, like kind of just like fun money, like whatever you want.
We should have. This is a room for improvement for me. We don't. Hey. We don't. Yeah. So, and then we joke. Aaron has a secret account where he puts, I don't know what it is, 10% maybe of his paycheck into this secret account that I don't have access to, so that he can buy me gifts. But he never buys me the gifts. It's always like, Rach, I want to go see, who's coming? Metallica. I want to go see Metallica in concert. Can I use this? He doesn't say, can I use? I shouldn't say that. He says, I'm going to use the secret account to pay for it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so there's transparency.
For sure.
It's just, that was a really good buy-in for you to be like, hey, Rach, I'm going to open up this secret account, and it's going to be for all the gifts I want to buy you, honey. And,
Yeah, that's how he
But actually, I just want to go to Metallica.
It was switch and bait. Bait and switch, I think it's called. Bait and switch.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's and, I mean, that's fine. He can have whatever he wants in it, as long as our budget... aligns. Exactly. So, so those were great questions. So that's what I do personally for my budget. And it works for us, and we review it. You mentioned earlier that with Mint, I think it was, but you get notifications, right? When you're reaching close to your spend, maybe you've put a limit for food. For the tool that I use, which can be so irritating sometimes, but it will tell me each time there's been a transaction. So if I buy that coffee, I get a notification on my phone. If Aaron buys lunch, I get a notification. And it's not to police anything. What I do like about it is it's that added awareness. Hey, you did spend this money.
100%. I've got them on too.
Yeah.
It keeps it top of mind, and your next purchase, you really think about.
Yes.
You know, is this something that I really want to be spending on right now?
Yeah. And it tells you when you're close to, so I haven't set a limit. I haven't said, okay, this month I'm only spending $1,000 on food. but it tells you your average over the last 3 months. So it'll say, hey, Rachel, you're spending more on Uber than you have typically over the last 3 months. So I do like that. It's, again, I think the theme here is awareness.
Yeah.
So that's how we handle our budget. It's taken us a long time to get to this point, and I still don't think our management of the budget is where I want it to be. There's always room for improvement, but this is the most aware my partner and I have been about our income, expenses, savings, and investments. And I think that's great.
Huge, Rach.
Yeah, it's cool.
Progress over perfection, steps forward, getting each other on board. This is a partnership. You know, they say the biggest determinants of wealth in your life is like number one's who you choose as your partner.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy, but it's so like, you know, yeah, so huge. Congrats. That's like a big celebration there. Because I know it's easy to get wrapped up in it, and it's not always that we're celebrating those small moments. So yeah.
Thanks, Steph.
Proud of you guys.
You mentioned something though that just sparked a thought. As our listeners start these steps to financial literacy, it would be very interesting to, in your first step of kind of review your relationship, your money mindset, right? Your relationship with money, and see how that ties in with your partners if you have one.
Absolutely.
I think that would be so neat to see and very telling. One, it will either reinforce, hey, we're on the same page, which I think will be really important when it comes to your budget, especially if you're sharing accounts with another person, to make sure that you have the same money mindset, or that they're both positive ones. Or else I think it will be very hard to get to your goals. And if you don't have the same money mindsets, then to dive a bit deeper and understand why that is. Because to your point, if part of building wealth is picking the right partner to do it with, that step will be critical.
Critical. Absolutely. And if just so your time horizons and like your focus align. Because if someone's expectations are one way and then yours are another, that can just lead to a lot of like disappointment, resentment, frustration. So key to lay it out. And like even Sean and I, my husband, we just, in the past, I think it was December, if I go back, December 2022, maybe November, somewhere in there, that's when we formally started to sit down and do our budget. And it's evolved a lot, as you say, Rach, like you do some learning just in the mistakes that you're making and how you're doing it, inconsistency of following through. That's come up a lot. Even recently, we had 3 months that we hadn't sat down to discuss. And it just felt so heavy and like, oh, like this is just, I don't know what's fully like going on. Like, so we need to prioritize this. And we actually, in the past couple of months, so last month and this month, we've gotten back on track, because that happens. You fall off, life happens. Like December was really busy with Christmas and whatever happens, you know, things, but getting back on track is key. And wow, the relief of just like knowing the numbers is like, yes, wow, this is why we do what we do, right? Cool. And then you can course correct sooner. So if the ideal of a budget is for us to stay on budget, some months it doesn't happen. And so how can we course correct? What do we need to adjust for in the like next month? And just to realign. And yeah, what we've also been doing is going out. We chose, like, we went out for wing night just this last week, because the date night, budget night, we're making it like a date night. So we went out to wing night. It was so loud. It was hilarious. Sat down. We have shared accounts, but Sean went through all of the ones out of the primary account. And then I go through all of the credit cards and just did it. And it felt so much more fun. Like we just spent the hour and a half. That's all it took to go through all the accounts, put it into the spreadsheet, so it automatically highlights in the spreadsheet we use red when you've overspent, and if it's good, it's green. Mm-hmm. I love that. So visually it takes you right to where you need to improve, because I actually set like our limits, right? So much. I would highly recommend it. It was like, coffee shop we might go to next time, but we did wing night and it was just a blast. Then we just had the rest of the time just to connect and just be like, cheers to us and like this commitment.
I love your version of foreplay. It's just so sexy.
Oh wow, right? Woohoo!
Like the licking of the fingers and then like the
so we ate the wings after we were on the computer. Oh, it was funny because we couldn't. Oh yeah, no, that's hilarious. We did it first, and then the wings came after.
You had to earn the wings.
We did the budget.
But I think that's great, and I like that you highlight. It doesn't have to be so formal and serious. Yeah, you can make it fun.
Exactly. It's so huge. Yeah. And then with just the budget too, with the savings you guys were talking about, once you have that rainy day fund, and so like when you have yours and you've maxed it out, and then it's like, that's a nice opportunity of what is left to invest, right? Or like what other big saving trip, or I always go to trips, but like, what am I saving for now? Is it a trip? Is it, I don't know. What else do people? All I can think about is trips. The pants, like Rach wants. Like, what is your thing? A concert you want to go to? I don't know.
I've been thinking about. I've been watching David Chang's dinner night series he has on Netflix. I just butchered the title of this show, but one of the episodes he does is he serves caviar. Caviar is like the highlight of the meal, and he puts it on everything. Like these guests are having caviar and absolutely everything. I've never had caviar, so that's now, and I know how frou that sounds, I guess. But I want to try it. So now that's kind of near, not the top of my list, but on a list of things that I might budget for. Maybe we'll do a New Year's thing this year, maybe next year, and just say like, hey, I've waited 30 years to try this caviar and now I get to do it, right? So maybe it's travel, maybe it's caviar, maybe it's pants, but it's fun to have that savings down and then think, okay, what else I can do? What can I do with this? It's kind of cool.
Absolutely. That's where those bucket list things come in, and adding caviar to it sounds like an awesome experience. I don't know how it's going to taste. I think there's different levels of caviar, because I think you have like gold plated caviar and there's like all these different ones. So you can kind of pick and choose. Maybe you start here.
Wait to share with everyone in 5 years when I can afford it, what it's going to taste like. Maybe you guys already know. Tell us if it's worth it.
You'll have a review. Yeah. Yes. Oh, that's pretty advanced. I think the fanciest thing I've had is like escargot.
That's fancy.
Well, it was like a mushroom. I couldn't tell the difference between the mushrooms and the escargot, and I was like, "This is delicious." Nice. Same kind of texture. Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. But
okay.
Yes, awesome. Lots of different ways to do the budget.
Before our next episode, we encourage our listeners to create a budget. If you already have a budget, then we encourage you to review it and just make sure that it still reflects your current income, expenses, and savings. Like Steph was saying, it's sometimes can be cyclical. It changes depending on your life stage. So maybe you created a budget 5 years ago and it needs some updating. And then during this experience, once you've completed the budget, we would love to hear your insights. I would love to hear about what surprised you, even maybe what emotions came up before you started the budget, doing the budget, once you were done the budget. Maybe it was a bit of a roller coaster. We want to know. We want to hear about how it went, how you felt. And really, we're just hoping that it's an empowering experience and that in the end, the result is you have some direction and confidence on how to move forward.
Yeah, you've taken the first step. So that's great. Just sit with whatever comes up. And like Rach said, yeah, that empowerment's going to come. It's going to feel like a relief, I think. So look forward to you joining us next time. We're going to be diving into some tools. Hey, Rach?
Tools and more about compound interest.
Stay tuned. Have a great week, everyone. This podcast is designed to provide listeners and viewers with a general overview of how to start investing and growing wealth, provide value to our communities, and live a life of wellness. It is not designed to be a definitive investment guide or life guide to take the place of a qualified financial planner or other professionals. Given the risk involved in investing of almost any kind, there is no guarantee that the investment method suggested in your personal or financial life will be profitable. We do not assume liability of any kind for any losses that may be sustained as a result of applying the methods suggested in this podcast, and any such liability is hereby expressly disclaimed.